Hello, this is Speedlag, and welcome to another animation tutorial. This is going to be a pretty talky one because it is an artist commentary video where I screen recorded my entire process step by step as I made this walk cycle, featuring my original character from my upcoming film, coincidentally named Cycle. I'll cover every step of the process, from illustrating my character with vector shapes inside Moho, rigging my puppet, and animating my loop. Now, one thing I won't be covering is this 2D animation that I created in Procreate Dreams. This is my preferred method. I like to start with a reference animation of some sort just as a guide. It's not a necessary stage by any means, so I just wanted to call that out. Now, I'm going to cover a lot of information, but it's still pretty broad strokes, so if you have any follow-up questions at all, just drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them there. Otherwise, it's a long one, so buckle up and let's get into it. Okay, so first thing, once I got into Moho, I pulled in some reference and also pulled in my pencil test animation that I made in Procreate, and that's what I'm going to be referencing for my illustration and animation. I just started kind of building in shapes. I knew that I wanted to start with this coat design that I'm pretty comfortable with. Once I knew that I had that, I'd be able to work on the rest. So right now, it's just a matter of building out the vector outlines in Moho and then separating them, creating shapes with them, and then fills. If you haven't done a whole lot of Moho, this took me a little bit to understand, but you build out the vector outlines, and it's almost like building out a mesh in a 3D program, and then you add the material to it later. So you create your selections and then you add your materials. So that's what I'm doing here. Once I got into the fingers, I wasn't thinking too much about how I was going to rig it, so I know now that I'm actually going to end up kind of redoing these shapes later, but these at least gave me a good idea of what finger shape I wanted them to be. Duplicated them. Didn't think too much about it. I'm not too precious about the actual design of individual elements, especially this early in the illustration. A lot of it tends to be iterative and stuff that you go over and over again. Just don't get too precious about any individual shapes. So you're kind of getting the volume of the hand in place. One thing worth noting is that I am not building this from a T-pose. I'm really just illustrating it based off of the beginning of this animated loop, this walk cycle loop. So I just know that this is going to be a frame and it doesn't move too much from this position. The character doesn't. So I know that I'm going to be able to make this work for the motion that I have. So yeah, once I got that front arm in place, I started building out the other part of the coat. It's just kind of like a graphic design, like a really graphic shape that's just going to be the back end of it. Now I'm building all of my shapes out on different layers. I know that sometimes in Moho you can get away with doing quite a bit on the same layer. I am not that comfortable with especially like the new Liquid Shapes tool, so where you can do some on layer masking. So I'm just kind of doing them all on different layers. That just gives me enough flexibility, and I don't really see a downside to it. So yeah, just adding in some extra detail. This is the little wrist shape. This is like a little cap to the end of the sleeve. I remember not being sure what layer I wanted that little piece to be on, like if I wanted to be on with the hand or if I wanted to be with the sleeve. So I think I actually kind of go back and forth on that decision. A lot of this, I don't actually know what I'm doing. I'm not, I should rephrase that. I'm not entirely confident exactly with the direction I'm taking, like where I'm placing points, how I want, like, for instance, the leg to cap off at the end. If I want to build the details on the same layer as like the leg, like that little line that I'm building across for the boot, if I wanted that to be on a different layer, if I wanted to be on the leg layer, I ultimately kept on the same layer as the leg. But these are things where I know that there's probably better ways to do it, but Moho is very forgiving as far as your workflow. Like, you can almost always go back and fix something. So it's better to just get the points down, just kind of get the general shape in place, just start getting your elements in there, and then fret over how they're going to work once you get into the rigging process or even in the animation process. So once I get that first leg in, then I, always try and duplicate where you can, just repurpose elements, especially for a character like this where everything is pretty symmetrical. It's a profile. A little bit of a adjustment since it's the back leg, but not too much. For the character head, I thought about doing a little bit of a head turn, but since this is just a single loop, it ultimately is about like 30. I think right now I have it set at 32 frames. Ultimately, I end up kind of extending it, but it's a really short loop. So you don't want to have too much motion, because then you just see that repeated motion and it kind of gives away the loop and makes it look a little bit worse. So I didn't really plan on doing a head turn with this, just leaving the head profile. So here, I'm building out the elements. This is a character I've drawn quite a number of times, so I have an idea of what the shape of this character is going to be in my head. So there wasn't a whole lot of fretting over what that shape was going to be. The hair, just some fun shapes. I didn't want to build this out of too many different pieces, just kind of get the general look in there. You build out the outline, get everything looking proportionately pretty good. Then you grab all your points and turn it into a shape and give it its color, and then move on. Moving on to the other arm. This arm has even less movement. The front one has some foreshortening we have to deal with, but this one pretty much remains in profile. So I just built it all in the same shape, and then I'm going to use Smart Bones to fix that little crease in the corner when the arm bends. Some people might build this out of two shapes and try and give themselves a circle in the center, a nice fulcrum in the center, or I guess a hinge, but I really like that Moho gives you the chance to create a more organic bend, so that's what I was going for here. Illustrating the hand. I remember not being totally sure how I was going to do this, like if I was going to have the hand a little bit at an angle or a little bit of a profile, but this was kind of a nice start. I like this shape. I like the shape of these kind of thick fingers from this side, kind of have a nice look. So building out the phone that she's holding. In case you haven't picked up on it, this is like my character. She's walking in a dark environment, so this is her holding up her phone as a flashlight. It's kind of building a little illusions to the other fingers in there. Copying and pasting the other fingers where I can. Adding some detail here and there. Like I play a little bit with like adding complication to the shape of certain objects, like making it feel a little bit more broken, a little less pristine. Vector has such a clean quality to it, so I'm always kind of seeing if I can like break little chunks out of it, if I can add a little bit more interest where shapes intersect. So now I'm just kind of I'm always keeping that in mind, but I'm definitely starting to make those decisions at this point. Now I'm starting to play with the masking, so this is where the fact that I saved them onto different layers helped. I know I break out even more. So here I have both legs as masking out the shadow from underneath the jacket. I know I eventually end up breaking that out. So yeah, adding some shadows in here. These are shadows that I will probably not try and rig too much. I actually would prefer to almost just go back in and keyframe them manually. Some cases I'll be able to parent them to the rig, but really I'm just kind of thinking at this point, like, okay, I'll just go in, I'll do my basic animation, and then I'll move these shadows around to make them look good in the final version. Again, just kind of adjusting my proportions. Things are looking pretty close to right at this point. I always kind of end up trying to offset the amount of visual weight of a character, so her jacket actually feels like it would take up more visual weight, but because it's bright red and it's her torso, but I end up usually kind of shrinking that. Here I'm going for the eye shape, and I'm really glad that I had the reference on the other side of the screen because it helped me not overthink this, because there's a million different ways to do an eye, and I'm always struggling a little bit with like how much to simplify or how much to add complexity to an eye design, but I really liked what I have in my reference image, so I just tried not to stray from it too much. I wanted it to be something somewhat simple too. I'm not planning on doing a whole lot of animation with this. I just knew that I'd want to do an eye blink, so I get the basic pupil shape in there. I would just an oval, and then just getting a little bit of a eyelash or a little illusion of some makeup on there. This character, she doesn't talk during the short that I designed her for, so her eyes need to be really expressive and have to be able to tell the audience a lot of emotion. So that's part of why I landed on this design. And she's got these funky little eyebrows, which are really fun to animate. Skipped a little bit in time here, but we just kind of added some extra shadow layers to her sleeves, just this softer shadow. Played around with adding some extra texture because I like it in my reference image, but it felt like it was going to be a little too much on this one, so just kind of painting in some ideas, just seeing if there's anything that sticks. It's important to play and to try and find some moments of serendipity while you're working. Like nothing is ever right away. You just have to keep kind of poking at and prodding things and knowing that it's okay to go back and adjust things. I don't have an actual timeline for how long I was working on this, but I know I worked on this about 4 hours the first day, which is my illustrating the character and beginning the rigging process, which we're doing right now. So the rigging process, this is where I tend to feel pretty comfortable, but also it is the longest part of the process. So I always start off with the center of gravity bone right at the back, and then just build off of there. So built her spine in, built her neck in, built a bone for the head, This little trick that I'm doing right now is something that I've seen on YouTube, and I'll see if I can post the link to the video I found, because it's been a technique that I really love and something that I keep coming back to, using target bones instead of just a single bone. And here I'm building the IK for the legs, which need a little bit of adjustment to work properly. IK, of course, being inverse kinematics. So these are the controls that you create so that you can have that bend from the legs. And so just kind of testing it out. Now, Moho never works the first time, or at least I should say it often doesn't work the first time. It just requires a lot of adjustments to get it to work properly, and this is totally expected. So anytime I'm twisting it around and things don't look like they're moving right, I tend to be looking at just a very particular thing just to see if that is working, and just ignoring everything else that isn't working. Because as you connect layers to individual bones, which is what I'm doing here, just grabbing layers, grabbing the bone, then linking those layers to those bones, the other bones will stop being linked to that layer, if that makes sense. So once you assign a layer to a bone, no other bones are influencing that layer anymore. So as you start to remove things that aren't being influenced by the other bones, then it just starts kind of working. So here I'm adjusting my influence. I didn't realize I hadn't done that yet. Yeah, things are starting to look really good. Some things are easier than others, like the arms look great. The legs definitely require some more. Give myself some foot and toe bones. All right, so now that we see the bones are colored, this is where I'm connecting individual Bezier points to the bones. So did a little bit of that, and now we're working on the smart bones. So the smart bone system is one of the most powerful parts of Moho. It's really responsive, and essentially saying whenever this bone bends in this way, all of the shapes will move in this particular way. So it's really great for working on how the arm creases when it bends, and how the wrist will interact with the bone when it moves. So get a little bit of like that sleeve bending up when the hand moves up, for instance, like it's doing right here. Now this is really tedious because you have to do it to just about every bone, and you have to do it for 2 times for every bone. So when the bone bends one direction, you have to build the smart bone for that, and then when the bone bends the other direction, you have to program the smart bone for that. So I'm doing here, thinking that looks really great, testing out, saying, is there anywhere else I need to do it? Maybe a little bit on the neck. Maybe when the head bends back, we'll have the neck kind of stretch to go with it. Have the shadow move when it bends. All right, now this one's a little hard, so I wasn't entirely sure what to do for this, and so I'm kind of trying out stuff. This foreshorten technique, it's not bulletproof. In fact, I would venture to say it doesn't even really work in my final version, but you got to play, you got to try stuff. So I'm setting up a smart bone for that inner target bone right now. It's kind of working. You can see some other things being influenced by it. Now here I am trying to make some decisions. There's a lot of points in this area. So I'm just trying to decide, okay, what's going to be parented to what bone? You know, you can see it's not exactly working great. I think I decided that'll be a later problem. So I'll just move on to something I'm more comfortable doing, like making a shadow. And this shadow, you know, how's it going to be influenced by these bones when they move? It's working okay. All right, now the leg smart bones. These are always super fun to set up. I really like creating that, making sure the volume fits in there. I think that legs can have really interesting shapes, like how much of the calf muscle do you want to keep in there? How much do you want to, where do you want the knee to bend? So trying to decide that here. I'm going to do it on the other leg. I'm sure there's probably a way to like duplicate the bones and have the same smart action work for both, but I do like the kind of organic nature of this process. I like being able to just move every little thing and decide that. I think that little bit of asymmetry is nice. As the foot rolls up, keeping that shape. I did put the ankle, like the goal of the IK, where the ankle bends down. I did make that a little high, higher than I probably like it to be. So it causes me some issues when I get into animation that I don't actually solve. So there'll be some slipping, some foot slipping on the ground. So that's something that I learned a little bit of and will probably make adjustments for in the future, or maybe give myself a little bit more controls down there in the foot. I know that there's some interesting and complex ways to make a true foot roll rig, but this time I just gave myself a little bit of toe bend and it got me 90% of the way there. So these little smart bones that I'm setting up right now, getting real nice. Same thing on the other foot. Kind of one that moves the whole foot at an angle. These are very chunky feet, but they have to retain some version of their shape or else they'll just start to turn into blobs. Nice. Get a little test, move everything around. This is so fun. Playing around. Always check your rig. I don't tend to put keyframes in while I'm rigging, but I do always test everything. Here I just parented all the points of the eye to a little bone for the pupil. That was easy. I didn't give myself too many external animation controls, but I did create a smart bone for the eye blink. I could have probably just as easily just animated this since it's for a loop, so it's not like she's going to be blinking a whole lot, but you know, why not? It's so easy to set up, why not just do it? Usually I'd probably create something more complex to have like a different control for the top of the lid and for the bottom of the lid. It's also a little bit of a pet peeve of mine to have the bottom lid move at the same rate as the top lid because eyelids close from the top, but yeah, it's a cartoon, so I didn't overthink it too much here. This little bone get up for the eyebrows, something I really like. So you put a single pin point on the top on both ends, and then you put a target bone in the middle, and then you parent the end points to the little pin bones, and then you parent the center two of the oval to that target bone in the center, and it gives you a nice squashy little thing to move. Sorry, I get I'm kind of moving through this area a little quick, but this is an overview of everything. So these little individual tricks are things I could cover on their own at a different time. But it's nice to see use case scenario how I like using them. Here I'm just creating some little bones for the collar and just parenting points to those. So that's what those little dot bones are. You know, parent the top points of the shoulder to the torso. Checking my parenting here. Yeah, I think I experimented with rebuilding this arm down here. Target bones seem to be working all right. That is, of course, an FK, so it's forward kinematics, meaning that the animation controls are hierarchically working from the bottom to the front. So to move the arm, you have to move the arm. You aren't moving a endpoint like you are with the other arm. Yep, just building a little bit more smart bones, having the shadow react correctly while that bicep moves. And now I was thinking if I can get a better squash in that sleeve. Yeah, like I said, this is a bit experimental, trying to figure out the best way to do foreshortening with the rig. That gray shadow is... Oh, let me back up. It looks like I'm just trying to reparent that red sleeve differently. Had to break apart the hand a little bit to make that work. Yeah, so that gray shadow that's on the sleeve, I think I just end up kind of masking that. So it's not a part of the sleeve shape itself anymore. I think I just have it being masked by that front part of the sleeve. And it works well enough. It's not the most truthful looking one, but it works pretty well. Yeah, so I had to get rid of it, put on its own layer. This is me rebuilding it. And then I end up just masking it against the forearm of the sleeve. And it works pretty well. All right, and then I think this is the last little bit of rigging. So I know I mentioned earlier that I'm not planning on doing a 3/4 head turn or any kind of head turn. It just feels like a bit too much for this loop, for this cycle, but I did feel like I could get a little bit of rotation in the hand that's holding the phone, bring a little bit more emphasis to it. It's the key feature. It's the driving force behind this animation, the reason she's in this pose. So adding a little bit of complexity, a little bit of dynamics to this by just adding even a little bit of depth or dimension to this hand felt like it was worth the effort. So this is setting up a little bit of a hand turn. I don't claim to be very good at this. I definitely didn't go into this with a plan. So everything's layered out the way it is, and I have to do some relayering within the shape of the hand itself. So I'm just kind of building it in, figuring out, okay, exactly how far do I want to push this? How far can I push this? How much of a headache is it going to be to push it any further? You can see the layering on the hand, and the little red of the sleeve is, it's causing me some issues. The phone itself is causing me some issues. I just had a little rectangle there, so I didn't have it like built into multiple pieces. So I have to end up going in and adding more pieces to it. And I think I had to add a shape to the hand. Okay, well there I just moved the wrist back just to give myself a little bit more space. Yeah, and so here I'm building a little bit of hand that's going to obscure the red part of the sleeve when the hand turns. So of course, below the hand you see a bone there, and that's going to be my driving bone, my control for the hand turn. So I'm building out a smart bone action for this hand turn, of course. Yeah, a lot of effort going into this. I know that people are always talking about the holy grail of the 360-degree body turn. And I do think that there's a lot of great skill that it takes not only to make it, but also you learn so much throughout the process of it. I just feel like when we're working in an animation program, we should be at least not a 3D one. I think 3D animation programs can get away with a lot more complexity because, it's a full 3D space. But in these 2D animation programs, I don't see any reason to spend a lot of time doing something to make a rig do something that you don't even plan on doing with it. So if it can turn all the way around, but your character isn't going to turn all the way around, you have essentially done a lot of work for nothing. And it's nice to do to better your skill set, you learn a whole lot making it, but that shouldn't always be the goal. The goal should be, what is the best thing to rig for the story I'm trying to tell, for the thing I'm trying to put into motion. So I know that's a little bit of a rant, but I guess the main point being that it's okay to have a little bit of flexibility and freedom when you're animating, but also don't spend too much time doing something that's not even going to help you in the end. So I'm just building a little bit of a hand turn here, but I'm not trying to go all the way to the front. I'm not even adding bones to the fingers because they're just holding onto the phone. They're just doing what they need to do and nothing more. And I'm satisfied with that. So yeah, of course, keeping the perspective of the phone itself and keeping the perspective of the fingers when it turns is really important. But once it's done, it's such a small detail, it just needs to look good enough. Yes, then the other hand. So here I realize, oh yeah, I gotta actually have these fingers kind of move in perspective since the hand is moving across the frame. So I'm building the same sort of setup that I used for that eyebrow that I was talking about. So just a pin bone on either end of the finger, and then a target bone that's parented to one of those pin bones, and it's targeting the other pin bone. So you get this bone that will move like it will always be pointing in the direction of the other. So, it's always pointing towards the root of the hand. So here I am attempting to parent the Bezier points to the individual bones that I laid out. I know that I end up redoing it because the shapes are not conducive to that. So this is me kind of, I gotta redo these shapes. Not a huge deal. Again, just gotta go in and do it. So I'm adding 2 Bezier points to the tip of the finger and 2 Bezier points to the end, and then 2 Bezier points in the center knuckle of each finger. So just rebuilding those, I've made my peace with it, just got to do it. I don't think I even rebuilt the bones. I just built the shapes. And now I'm parenting everything. So you can see the Bezier points change colors because they're changing the color to the bone that they're parented to. I got really good at these hotkeys. G to select stuff, B to select the bone, G to select the points, and then I to parent the points to the bones. And then test it out. Looking really good. I'm so happy with how these turned out. This is a technique I'm probably going to use some more. I probably should just do a video on it. Just a little technique that I love. But once that's there, you just get into the animation. Don't overthink it. Just get into motion. So there are a lot of ways to approach animation, and I don't know if my way is any better or worse than any others. I know some people block out just the key poses with hold frames, and then they go add the tweens. Since I already have pencil test animation as my reference, I just decided that, okay, I'm going to treat this rig as a cleanup pass or a tie down pass and just place it over the animation that I have. So using a little bit of onion skinning to get my path of action right, kind of moving everything around. I think this technique worked pretty well. I wasn't 100% married to the animation that I made in Procreate. It's actually not that good. It's just a rough pass. It's a rough pencil test. But once you have a pretty good rig in Moho, it's really easy to iterate on it and to update the animation. So I pushed it a little bit more. Like she ends up crouching a little bit more. She's a little bit more weight leaning into her steps. And she's a little more weight leaning into her steps, but then also she's on her toes because she's sneaky, she's not trying to move too quickly. She's not running. She's very sneaky. So she's kind of walking on her toes, but she's also trying to stay low to the ground, not be seen. So a lot of going in and adjusting that. And so I love the curve editor. I'm a big time curve editor fan. I think that getting comfortable with a little mixture of frame by frame animation and then getting comfortable with making adjustments in the curve editor. What I tend to do is I'll almost treat it like a frame by frame animator, setting up all of my animation. And then I'll go back in the curve editor and just delete points that feel like they're making it an awkward motion. And I'll start creating smoother curves. And that ultimately gives a better look to me. I really like the look a lot. Now, there's not a lot of poppy animation in this. I think poppy animation can be really expressive, and my final film will have more poppy animation, but this being a walk cycle, it's pretty smooth. You just want it to feel like it loops and like it feels natural. So here I'm adding a little bit of that sway in that front hand. And so I gave myself these little pin bones at the top of her hips so I could have a little bit of a back and forth sway in the hips. At the bottom of the frame, I just placed a shape down there just to kind of work as a guide. It's not something I'll keep in there. That's just something I knew I'd need for reference. Yeah, going back in. Now I'm just looking at her center of gravity. How does she go up and down? I split my axis, so I have a x-axis and a y-axis separate. So I'm usually just looking at, okay, well, how's the up and down bounce? How's that looking? Okay, it's looking pretty good. Okay, how is the sway looking? You know, she leans into her step and then falls back a little bit and then leans into the next step and falls back again. So that's what I'm setting up here. And look at all those keys. So deleting keys, deleting these points, moving them around. Getting comfortable in the graph editor is really important for animators, for computer animators. Moho's graph editor, I know a lot of people don't like it. I think as long as you can start focusing on the individual thing that you're trying to adjust the motion on, so be it the arm, be it the where the foot falls, that's all you're ever adjusting in any CG program anyway. You're never adjusting everything all at once, or at least you shouldn't be. So I actually really like, I've grown really used to, and I've grown accustomed to the Moho animation graph editor. I think that there's a lot of room for improvement, but it definitely gives me enough to do what I want to do, which is just adjust those curves. I'm also not using any dynamics in here. So Moho has a pretty good dynamic system in it, where it uses the animation of your rig to drive the animation of other stuff, like with wind or with torque. And anyway, I'm not using it for this. I want this character loop to be a solid loop, and I just didn't want to deal with like having something that was kind of chaotic being introduced into this. So I keyframed everything. There's nothing that's being driven by dynamics, and I think it's totally fine, especially for something this short. So yeah, here I'm trying to decide exactly where I want her arm to stand. You know, do I want her holding it way out? Do I just want her to keep it kind of close? So it's really easy to be able to adjust these things, of course. A lot of me just watching it over and over and over again. Make slight adjustments. You don't want anything to stand out as being poorly tweened. Yeah, you don't want anything to stand out as being poorly tweened. You want everything to feel natural. You want everything to feel like purposeful. Like, so much of animation is about motivation. So what's the character's motivation? You know, why is she holding her hand this way? Is she acting for anyone, or is she scared? Is she like, what's her motivating factor? And always kind of keeping that in mind whenever you're, okay, I'm moving her head right now. So is she actively trying to hold her head steady? Is it just kind of like rolling around arbitrarily? Okay, there's a lot of me messing with the timeline here. I was trying to figure out exactly how long I wanted my loop to be. Now I'm adjusting my toes. I think how feet fall, where they fall, and how they look during a pass-through animation is really challenging during a walk. Because you don't want the toe to feel like it's dragging on the ground, but you also don't want it lifting too much, because if it lifts too much, it just feels silly. A little bit of squash into her hair. So as she goes back, it just kind of poofs up a little bit, gathers a little bit. I was noticing that her fingers were kind of getting lost as she passed over her thigh, so I was like, okay, well, maybe I can introduce a little bit of a gradient into this. Didn't have too much of a plan, just wanting to add something. I did notice that it started to slow down Moho quite a bit, especially on that back leg where I have it, the back leg is masking out that shadow. So I end up kind of turning it off at some points, or at least going into my display settings and turning off masked shapes. So, use at your own risk. It worked for me for a little bit, and then I noticed it become a problem a little bit later on. So don't really have too much to say on that other than, that was my experience. I liked how the legs looked with the gradient there, but I didn't like how much the bottom gray matched the gray of the boots. So I played with changing the boot colors to black, but then that felt too heavy. So ultimately I decided it was going to be fine. Now this was a little bit more of a challenging bit. So I'm animating the foreground motion of that hand, that hand that's foreshortening. And it's a nice motion, but it felt like I was having a little bit of a pop, and I couldn't quite find exactly where that was coming from. But as the hand comes forward, there's a little bit of like a pop up. And then, of course, with Moho, you can always go in and adjust the points of the shape afterwards, which this is another one of my favorite things about it. So along with the smart bones, I really love the flexibility of being able to have these points be driven by bone motion, but then being able to go back in and move those points around and keyframe them so you can make just the subtle adjustments that make it just feel more organic and cleaner, like a cleaner bit of animation. Now I'm doing a little bit of motion on the back collar. I only animated the front collar before, but work on the back collar now. Man, we are getting real close. I've been talking for about 45 minutes straight and then some. So it's usually a good sign once I'm getting to the secondary animation. Once I'm just moving the whole curves around, it means I like the curves and I'm just playing with where they sit. But this is a great place to be. I know that I'm getting real close to the animation being complete. It's just how far do I want to take it? I knew that, I wasn't doing the 3/4 turn on the head, so I already had kind of made some decisions like, I'm not going to push this thing to the greatest walk cycle it could ever be, but I just wanted it to feel like it was right for the character. So we're getting real close. It feels like it matches the pencil test I was doing. It matches the motivation of the character. And it's turning out real nice at this point. I'm real happy with it. Time-wise, I guess I've probably spent about, I don't know, maybe 12 hours, but that's not constant work time. Usually about 2-hour chunks here and there. But everything is looking pretty good. Give myself a little bit more motion in that front hand. So yeah, I hope you've really enjoyed this walkthrough. This is something I'm trying. I don't know if this is the sort of thing that anybody really likes or if it's even interesting, but being able to do not really director commentary, but artist commentary over work that I've done was a lot of fun. So if you like this, leave a like on the video, leave a comment, ask any questions in the comments section, and I will do my best to answer them. If you had a particular technique that you liked and you can't find any more information about it out there on YouTube or the interwebs, then drop a question and I'll try and follow this up with some more specific techniques. I know in the last video I made, somebody asked about the illustration and vector process, so I wanted to make sure to include that here and talk about it. Thanks for watching. Again, my name's Speedlag. You can find me on Instagram at Speedlag, and right here where I make YouTube tutorials occasionally. Thanks for watching.